Hebrews 11, verse 1. Underline verse 1. Now, faith is the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen. For by it, faith, the people of old, so back in history, received their commendation. By faith, we understand that the universe was created by what? The Word of God. So that what is seen, planets, the earth, the moon, your pants, this building, your lunch, so that what is seen was not made out of things that are visible. By faith, and so now the writer of Hebrews is going to describe people of faith, people that had real faith, so we can kind of see where we line up. By faith, Abel, who was a son of Adam, the very first man. By faith, Abel offered to God a more acceptable sacrifice than Cain, who Cain was Abel's brother, through which he was commended as righteous, God commending him by accepting his gifts and sacrifices. And through his faith, though he died, he still speaks. By faith, Enoch, another guy that came later, was taken up off the earth into heaven so that he should not see death. And he was not found anywhere because God had taken him. Now, before he was taken, he was commended as having pleased God. Underline verse 6. Underline verse 6. Underline verse 6. This verse right here, my friends, is the reason you and I are to have faith in God. Here's the reason God doesn't show up physically to you every day and go, hey, let's go to Starbucks. What questions do you have? Okay? Because some of us wonder that. Okay, well, if God's real, then where is he? Show up. Let me see you. Let's walk in the woods together and talk about animals or whatever. Here's the reason that doesn't happen. Verse 6. And without what? Faith, it is what? Impossible to please him or to please God. For whoever would draw near to God, in other words, whoever's going to have a relationship with God, must believe that he exists and that he rewards those who what? Seek him. By faith, so now he's going to add another guy for today. By faith, Noah, being warned by God concerning events yet unseen, they were future events, in reverent fear constructed an ark for the saving of his household. By this he condemned the world and became the heir of the righteousness that comes by faith. Wow. For most of us, faith is an unseen thing. Because we don't know where faith comes from, where it exists, and if it does exist, say in your heart, how do you know the faith you have is true faith? You can't open up your heart and see what's inside of there, or can you? And actually, we're going to look at the fact that you might be able to do that in a certain sense. Because, watch, faith is different than thinking. Ready? It's possible, listen friends, it's possible for you to have information about God and not transformation from God. Watch how scary this is. So listen to what I'm saying. It's possible, friends, for you to think you know God but not know God. It's possible for you to have stuff about God but not a relationship with God. That's possible. And here's the reason that's scary, is because you can go to church your whole life. You can serve in a church. You can build a church, a building. You can give money to a church. You can do everything you think God wants of you, but not have a relationship with God. You can spend your whole life thinking you know somebody, but at the end of your life, you die and go to hell because you're separated from God. Why? Because you never got your sins forgiven. You never came into a relationship with God. You just knew him from a distance. So watch. Faith isn't, listen to me, faith isn't thinking about God. Faith isn't wishful thinking. Faith is knowing. Listen very carefully. Faith is not thinking about it. Faith is knowing it. Faith is knowing it's true even if you can't see it. That's what true faith is. We practice faith every day. You might not realize it. And we're going to look at it right here. Number one, faith in Jesus is greater than any other. Faith in Jesus is greater than any other. The faith you put in Christ will have a greater reward than any other faith you practice in your life. After describing the type of believers that will fail to endure, which is what we saw in Hebrews chapter 6 through 10, so we walked into some scary waters in Hebrews 6 through 10. We walked into waters that said, listen, it's possible for you to come to know Jesus, to believe in him, and throughout your life, abandon your faith. Say, I no longer want a relationship with you. I reject you. I had salvation. I had belief in you. I no longer want that. I reject God, and now God honors that and rejects you. So the scary part of Hebrews chapter 6 through 10 was the fact that we can be sanctified, changed by God, and God doesn't hold us as a gun to our head and go, you have to keep believing in me. We have to continue to foster living belief in our lives, the same belief that God has saved. We can choose to stop believing, going, I unbelieve in you, God, volitionally. You can never fall away from God. So you can never lose your salvation. You never wake up one day and go, I'm unsaved, ever. Your sin can never separate you from God. There's nothing in all of creation that separates you from the love of God. You are safe in God's hand. However, we looked at Hebrews 6 through 10, the fact that you can say, I no longer want you, God. And that's a volitional walking away. I'm done. We're done. That's different than your sin. That's different than struggling. It's saying, I no longer want a relationship with you. We're out. So now, after that kind of scary reality, the writer of Hebrews says, now let's look at the positive side. Now let's look at people who actually lived out their faith and received a reward. So faith, listen again, faith isn't wishing, faith isn't hoping, faith is knowing. Faith is knowing it's true. So it's different than information. That's why you can be a religion professor at USC. That's why you can be at UCLA or Notre Dame or Princeton or Harvard or Yale and teach about Christianity and not know Christ. That's why you can go to church your whole life and not know Jesus, because you go for information, not transformation. Everybody with me? That's the difference between just getting some religion and actually having a relationship with God. Because religion is just rules and how to live your life, but relationship is like, I do these things out of love for God. That's why relationship is transformative. Religion is just informational. Biblical faith isn't wishful thinking or imaginary hoping, but rather assurance that God's promises will be done as it's rooted in God's trustworthiness. So think about the people you don't trust in your life. Think about them right now. Could be sitting right next to you maybe, or whatever, but don't say anything. Why? Think about it for a second. Why don't you trust somebody? Say you don't trust the government, or you don't trust police officers, or you don't trust your boss, or you don't trust your husband or your wife or your kids or a pastor. Think about the reasons you don't trust somebody. Why is that? The reason you don't trust somebody is they've proven themselves untrustworthy in the past, right? They said, I'm going to do something, but they don't do it. And if it's a pattern of somebody's life, you go, the minute they open their mouth, you go, whatever. La, 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 I can't hear what you're saying. Why? Because you know the minute they get done speaking, it's not going to happen anyway. It's vapor. It just goes into the air. Why? Because their character doesn't match their words. So watch. It's called hypocrisy. It means that I'm saying one thing, but I'm going to do another. I speak one way, but I do something else. And so when when your words don't match your heart, you become untrustworthy. God, however, when he speaks to us, tells us he loves us, tells us he is going to save us, tells us he wants to do something in our lives, why can we trust God? Because his character is trustworthy. Even sometimes when we can't see it the way we want to see it. So when God speaks to you and me through his word, we know that's trustworthy. Why? Because it's based on his character. And his character is trust. His trustworthiness we base our life on. So listen, faith is not wishful thinking. I hope it's going to happen. Faith is knowing it's going to happen. Everybody with me? That's what faith is. You know what God's going to do because he's trustworthy. How many of you guys have ever gotten on a plane? How many of you guys have ever been scared out of your mind on a plane? So, I've ridden in planes really all my life, and I probably logged in hundreds of thousands of hours of just miles and being on a plane and being in airports and all that kind of stuff. And to this day when I get on a plane, I always sit by the window. And my son, who used to be like 3 foot tall, and I'd stick him in the middle seat, is now 6 foot something, 210 pounds. And so I don't care though, because I paid for the ticket, so Dad's going to sit where he wants to sit. And so my son has to sit in the middle row, and my wife sits on the aisle, and I sit by the window. I love sitting by the window. And here's the thing when you sit by the window, is at some point, you can see the wing. It's either in front of you, you're on it, or behind you. You can see the wing. The scary thing about getting on a plane is that as the plane is heading down the runway, and you see the wings going like this, I look at the wings and I go, those wings are full of jet fuel. That's where the planes hold their fuel. And so you realize when you're on the plane as it gets ready to take off, I am sitting inside of a tin can strapped to 2 bombs. held together by rivets. So as the stewardesses are standing in the aisle going, blah, 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 don't do this. Hey, if we happen to crash in the water, grab your seat. It'll be a flotation device, blah, they're going on and on, which I appreciate. I appreciate their safety concern for me, but here's the reality. If I drop like a rock from 30,000 feet strapped to a bomb, I'm going to see Jesus before I go to see anybody else, okay? The reality of us surviving a true plane crash are almost zero. Okay? So I know from aeronautical engineering that the most stressful time for a plane is takeoff and landing. And the reason for that is especially as you're taking off, the wings are loaded with jet fuel. One of the most combustible, explosive things you could ever put inside of a container, inside the wings. So as you take off, you see these wings going with the stress of this plane getting off the ground. So as I'm looking out the window, I go, I'm going to die. I'm going to die. We're going to die. We're going to die. There's not a more faith-inducing moment of your life than when you get on a plane. Why? Because you are absolutely helpless from the fact that if something goes wrong or somebody chooses to do something wrong, you are helpless. Now, here's the point of faith. As I get on a plane, I did not sit with my pilot when he learned about flying my plane. My pilot could have had a long night the night before, could have went out partying, and during the time when they were talking about flying my particular plane, he was tapped out. I don't know I've never even met that guy on the other side of the door, and he controls my life. I wasn't there at Boeing the day they bolted on the wings to my plane. My guy that was bolting on my wings, maybe he was mad at Boeing. Oh, they don't pay me enough here. I'm going to put in every other rivet. Or you know what? I'm tired today. I'm just going to do halfway. I'm going to put these rivets in halfway. Because as you watch these the wings bend, especially if you've ever been in turbulence, you literally see these wings going like this. And you just kind of go, these wings are just going to go, I'm done. And then they fly off and you're stuck in a tin can, plummeting to earth. The reality is faith is knowing that you're going to get from point A to point B. Why do you know that? because you're trusting in the pilot and his training, and you're trusting in the guys that built that plane, though you weren't there to see it happen. Faith says, I have information that's true, that should be true. He got trained. They put the wings on correctly. And I believe that's going to happen. And when I land in Seattle or wherever I'm going, my faith, my belief that that is true has paid off because I survived the plane ride. Everybody with me? It's not wishful hoping. It's saying, I know it's true. He trained. Somebody put those on correctly. I'm going to get there. I'm going to arrive at my destination. And that's the exact same kind of faith we need to have in God. You've never met him. He's never talked to you audibly, or you don't know what goes on with God, but you know because he loves you, he's going to do what he said he's going to do, that you're going to get and arrive at your destination because God is good to you. Everybody with me? That's faith. Not wishful thinking, knowing it's true. Having faith in Jesus isn't just hoping, but knowing. And in Genesis 1:1, the writer of Hebrews says that God created the heavens and the earth. And so the very foundation of your faith has to be the idea that, like in Hebrews 11:6, that God exists and that he rewards those who seek him. And even at the beginning of creation, we see that God built everything. So we just happen to have this set up today for VBS. And I love this because if you look at some of our planets represented here from our solar system, when we look at these, they're unbelievably, magnificently designed. Even our sun, it's a perfect distance from Earth to not scorch us. We have an unbelievable atmosphere system that we have no idea how that would have been created on its own. Like all the rest of our planets don't have atmospheres like ours. It actually chokes out and kills life. Our moon that has almost zero atmosphere gets pummeled by massive asteroids, and so nothing can live on any of these planets. We don't find life anywhere else. We can find evidence of water, but there's no life except on our planet. And our planet is unbelievably and miraculously suited to give life. So here's the point that the writer of Hebrews is saying. We weren't there during creation. I wasn't there. But we believe that God built the universe. Now, here's the crazy part, is that at the beginning of creation, there was nothing. There was literally nothing. So when I have always been told that we came from a singularity and it was the Big Bang, well, the problem is with the singularity is the laws of physics aren't acting now yet, because it's inside of this, all of space, time, and matter is compressed inside of this singularity. And at some point, it just says, it went bing! The only problem with that is even a big bang needs a big banger. Because things will go along in stasis until something acts upon it. The problem with science in this reality is that nothing can act upon this because everything's contained inside a singularity. So even scientifically, even when you watch Nova, they can't get to this first point of why is there gases in the singularity anyway? Why is it even existing? And what is it, if all space and time is inside of here, what's outside of the singularity? There's not even nothing, because even nothing is contained inside of something. So watch. Here's a reality of philosophy. Out of nothing comes nothing. From nothing comes nothing. You can't get something out of nothing. So you have to watch, but you can get something from someone. So God, who's never been created, can create a system and a universe without himself being created. He's eternally existed and created our time-space history. What that means is God built the whole universe and placed us on his planet. And so now we have the Creator who wants to have a relationship with us. And even though he doesn't walk with us physically, we have faith that what he's done in the past, which we weren't present for to see with our own eyes, we believe that he's done that because we see the effects of it in our life. So it continues to foster faith in us in him. So there's a Latin phrase for Genesis 1:1. It means ex nihilo, which is from or out of nothing, from nothing. God himself has built everything by his words. God spoke it into existence because of the power of God. So science can never come up with a beginner. It doesn't make sense about how things came about without a God creating it. Because even a cause and effect system, which is our system, has to have an ultimate causer to bring about our system. That was super deep philosophy. Everybody still with me? You're thinking about lunch? Okay. You got both? Okay, here we go. Faith in Jesus is greater than any other. Number 2, Abel had greater faith than his brother. Abel had greater faith than his brother. So now we see evidences of people who had faith and how we should emulate it. In the first family, the first murder occurred. So think about your own family. This may hit really home, like legitimately home. Sometimes we think, I don't know if there could be a more jacked up family than I've got. When you think of your own family, you go, oh man, this relationship's jacked up, this person's totally jacked up. You know, when Uncle Johnny comes over, I can't wait for him to leave. Thanksgiving, it's like the worst time ever because everybody comes piling in from all over the place. When you think about your family, think about all the relationships that are messed up inside of it. Could be between spouses, could be between kids, could be between parents, could be between extended family. Grandpas, grandmas, uncles, aunts. We would think, man, the closer you got back to the beginning of the first family, which was Adam and Eve, the closer you got to that pair, wow, the better families should be. But what we see is that the very first family, the very first 2 brothers, Cain and Abel, that came out, they have so much dysfunction that Cain ends up murdering his brother. And now you think you got some issues, which some of that may have gone through your mind, but this actually happened in the very first family. One of the brothers was totally righteous and one of the brothers was totally wicked. And let's see how they act. Turn to the first book of your Bible, Genesis, chapter 4. So we're going to read a couple parts out of Genesis, so keep a finger here. Genesis chapter 4, verses 1 through 12. Verse 1, now Adam knew his wife, and so this is the biblical way of letting you know this is sexual intercourse between a husband and a wife. This is how you and I are created. God built a male and a female, and through their sexual union comes children. And so we are here because of the first union of our first parents. And now Adam knew his wife, and she conceived and bore Cain. So Cain is the first son that's born, saying, I have gotten a man with the help of the Lord. So even Eve realizes that God is the giver of life. And again she bore his brother Abel. And so Cain is the older brother. Abel is the younger brother. They're very possible they were twins. Now Abel was a keeper of the ground, and Cain was a worker, Abel was a keeper of the sheep, and Cain a worker of the ground. In the course of time, Cain brought to the Lord an offering of the fruit of the ground, and Abel also brought of the firstborn of his flock and of their fat portions. So they're both bringing an offering to the Lord, one from the crops and one of an animal. And the Lord had regard for Abel and his offering, but Cain and his offering he had no regard. So Cain was very angry and his face fell. How many of us are absolutely borderline angry people all the time? Think about yourself. Think about the minute something goes wrong, you instantly, it's like a boiling pot that's almost always ready to blow. And so everything can be going along fine, but your heart is in turmoil because you're not at peace, because you're just borderline angry. And the minute somebody does something wrong, even a small thing, it's just like, that was profanity in tongues or whatever. That was okay. Like, you're always at the border of lighting somebody up. You're always at the border of just going nuclear. Why is that? Because out of the mouth, the heart speaks. So the overflow of your heart is produced out of your mouth. Your heart is the producer of what your hands do. Nothing becomes physical in you unless it comes from your heart. Your heart literally is the generator of what you do. So think about it this way. Think about what you do, and if you don't like what you see, in your actions, understand it's not a hand problem, it's a heart problem. So Cain and Abel are both bringing offerings to God. They're both trying to do worship. Cain brings something because he loves God. Abel brings something because he loves God. Cain brings something just on the exterior. It's not true of his heart. It's just what he brings. God, who knows the heart, rejects his offering, and that makes Cain blisteringly angry. So now Cain and Abel are older men. This isn't two teenagers fighting. They could have been 40, 50, 100 years old here. Adam lived to be almost 1,000 years old. Same with his wife, possibly. Now imagine, we think about some of our children, or some of our families having 8 kids, right? We go, whoa, that's a big family. Like, get a minivan, right? Imagine living for 800-900 years and having children. Ladies, how you doing? Right? So here's the thing. Adam and Eve have kids, 2 of whom are Cain and Abel. They're grown men. They probably have their own families. Cain and Abel, as a family unit, start to hate one hating the other because one was righteous and the other was wicked. God knew that, and he puts pressure on Cain by rejecting his offering, and the pressure exposes his heart. And look what happens here in verse 6. The Lord said to Cain, "Why are you angry? And why is your face fallen? If you do well, will you not be accepted? And if you do not do well, sin is crouching at your door. Its desire is for you, but you must" what? Rule over it. In other words, you don't have to sin. When you're angry, you don't have to go nuts. You don't have to go berserk. Control it. Be in control of yourself rather than losing control of yourself. Cain spoke to his brother Abel, and when they were in the field, Cain rose up against his brother Abel and killed him. Then the Lord said to Cain, where is Abel your brother?" One of the most famous verses in all of history. We get a phrase that comes from this story. Am I my brother's keeper? That comes from this story right here. Then the Lord said to Cain, "Where's your Abel your brother?" And he said, "I don't know. Am I my brother's keeper?" Imagine saying that to God. You think your kids are smart, Alex? I don't know. Am I my brother's keeper? You're God. You should know where he is. Oh man, that's how you get lit up in my family. I can't imagine being God. But God's more patient than I. And so he actually counsels Cain. Look what he says. Verse 10, "And the Lord said to him, 'What have you done? The voice of your brother's blood is crying to me from the ground, and now you are cursed from the ground, which has opened its mouth to receive your brother's blood from your hand.'" And I want to make this point to you. Abel had faith in God, and guess what? It cost him his life. Your faith will not always reward you in this world. You're going to have people that hate you. You're going to have people that reject you. You're going to lose jobs. You're going to lose friends. You're going to lose stuff in the pursuit of God. Plan on it. Plan on losing stuff in pursuit of God. In fact, I would almost say this. If there's no resistance to your faith, do you have real faith? Because what that means is you parallel the world so closely that there's no difference. There's no pressure against you. So can you really say you have faith in God who opposes the world's systems of sin if there's no resistance against your faith? Cain, very first family, kills his brother. Why? Because his heart was evil and his brother's was righteous. And let me make this point to you. The only way you truly know what's in your heart the majority of the time is when pressure's put on it. You got financial pressure? Who do you trust? You got relational problems with your wife or your husband? Who do you take that to? You take it to the bottle? You take it to the bar? You take it to gossip? You take it to Twitter? Do you take it to Jesus? You got problems with your kids in parenting, or vice versa? You got problems with your older parents or whatever? Who do you take it to? Do you take it to Jesus, or do you just take it to your own wisdom? The issue here, my friends, is that God will allow difficulty in your life, not because he hates you. He will allow difficulty in your life to expose what you truly believe, to expose where your faith is. Because until pressure comes, you can deceive yourself into thinking what's true that's not necessarily true. Cain thought he could get away with being superficial with God. God exposed it through pressure by saying, "I don't no longer want that." And it exposed the rage and anger in his heart. which never would have been exposed if God hadn't exposed it. So God will allow difficulty in your life, not because he doesn't love you. He will allow difficulty to go, who do you really trust? An evil heart hides motives that are not exposed until action bears them out. Number 3, so Abel had a greater faith than his brother. And then another example, Enoch had greater faith than his culture. Enoch had greater faith than his culture. So this is another guy just after Adam and Eve. In the first, Enoch was the 7th generation from Adam. Even at this early time in human history, he prophesied about punishment from God on wicked humanity. As Enoch walked with God, he was one of only 2 people recorded that were taken directly to heaven without dying. So look at this. Look at Genesis chapter 5. Genesis chapter 5, verse 21. So the next chapter. Genesis 5:21. When Enoch had lived 65 years, he fathered Methuselah. Underline verse 22. Enoch walked with God after he fathered Methuselah 300 years and had other sons and daughters. Thus all the days of Enoch were 365 years. Enoch walked with God and was not, or couldn't be found anymore. Why? For God took him. Think about walking so tightly with God that you don't even have to die. He just takes you directly to heaven. I mean, now that's awesome. To walk in faith with God that tight, that God just goes, you know what, we're going to forget death, just come up with me. And the funny part about Enoch is he spent his life at the very beginning of creation. So we talked about Cain and Abel, first brothers. Now we talk about Enoch a little bit later. Enoch is preaching against his culture. That was totally against God. He was preaching against a culture that allowed things that God never allowed. Does it remind you of anybody else's culture? Now we're thousands of years later after Enoch. And like Enoch, he felt pressure to change what he believed. Because we feel cultural pressure to even change what we believe. Same thing with Enoch. He kept telling people, God loves you, but you got to change your ways. You can't continue to go in the way you're going and please God. His culture said, no, this is the rules we're going to make you live by them. I want you to, Enoch's culture said, you change. We don't have to change. So I walked into a restaurant 2 weeks ago, and I had to go to the bathroom. And so as I'm walking to the bathroom, I see the ladies' room, which had a little stick figure of a woman in a dress, which designated female. And then I walk to the guys, and it has a white triangle. And underneath it, it said all genders. And so I'm a science guy. My dad's a earth science biologist. I grew up in science my whole life. And I'm looking at the door that I'm about ready to go partake of. And I'm going, all genders? You got one right there on the other door, and there's only one other gender. So, I'm not understanding what you're saying, sign. And the reality is, and you know as well as I do, that we live in a culture now where they go, oh, there's many genders. I think they said there's like 70 genders now, where if you are a physical man, but you think you're a woman, or you want to be a woman for this moment, you want to go into the women's bathroom, you can choose to do that because your gender isn't fixed. Let me tell you something, friends. Your gender is fixed. To figure out what gender you are, just look down. It's not hard. Okay, listen. And here's the reason. So I'm being a little bit lighthearted about it, but I want to make this point. Our culture says, nope, there's a ton of genders. If people want to choose their gender, they can do whatever. That is absolutely false on every level possible. It's not even scientific. You know how you figure out what sex you are? Is you can take a genetic test, which will tell you every single cell of your body is male or female. unless you have ambiguous genitalia, which came up in the first service online, and I'm not going to get to that right now. I'm going to get to that when I teach on sexuality in our next series after Hebrews is over, so I'm going to get to that. But I want to make this point out of faith. Our culture says, hey, you have to believe this about gender. God built male and female. Let me make this point to you. You know how long it takes for you to transition from one sex to the other? If you're transsexual, because I'm transitioning from being a man into a female, you know how long that takes you? Never. You want to know why you can never transition sexes? Because every single cell of your body tells you what sex you are. That's why if you leave skin at a crime scene, they can swab your skin and go, this looks like a white female did this crime. You know why they can say that? Because inside every cell tells you what sex you are. Never in your whole life, through hormone therapy or anything else, will you change the genetics of your cells. You can change the physical genitalia. This means physical genitalia. You can change that, but it will not make you a man. It will not make you a woman. So our culture tells us something different. You know, even the word gender, oh man, I'm gonna start going. Listen, the word gender, stop, listen. This is science. This isn't even religious talk. So don't go, oh, you're a hater. I don't hate anybody. I just like truth. So here's the reality. Listen to what I'm saying. The word gender, it comes from the word genus, which we get the word genes from. Not these genes. We get the word genes. Like your DNA tells you what sex you are. That's gender has always meant male and female. Always. Even on things that go, what gender are you? Male or female, check a box. Our culture has redefined gender. But that doesn't mean gender doesn't have a reality in God. You can say what gender is, but God ultimately decides what gender truly is. Everybody with me? You can't just stick your own definition on and go, this is what it is. Nope, it has a definition. So we feel, and the point I'm making to you is we feel pressure from our culture, so much so businesses have to change their signs on a bathroom to say all genders can go to the bathroom here. To me, I don't care. Go to whatever bathroom you want. I don't care. Whatever you think, if you're a man/female, whatever you struggle with in your mind, don't invite me into don't force me to be a part of your world. I don't force you to be a part of my world. I invite you to come into my world, right? I don't force you to love God. I say, here's the amazing thing God's doing. So don't force me to even be a part of what your delusion is about who you think you are if you think you're different than how God built you. I still love you. It's still love. But don't force me to be something that's in your mind and not in reality. Everybody with me? So it's not hate. It's saying let's dialogue about what's true. Because you can find out what's true when you look at reality. Okay, so Enoch had greater faith in his culture. We don't allow culture to tell us what's true. We allow God to tell us what's true. Everybody with me? So it doesn't mean you hate your culture. I love my culture. But I will not allow my culture to tell me what's true. I will tell my culture what's true, and my culture may hate me for it. Believers have value for their culture, but never have their culture's values. Woo! I love my culture. I love my culture, but I will never let my culture tell me what's true. Because I love God more than I love my culture. And lastly, Noah had greater faith than the world. Noah had greater faith than the world. Noah spent his life of 500 years walking with God. When God was to destroy the wicked earth with a flood, he told Noah as the only righteous one. So turn to Genesis 6. It's the next chapter in Genesis. Genesis 6, 5 through 14. Genesis 6, 5. The Lord saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every intention of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. And the Lord, look how sad this is in verse 6. And the Lord regretted that he had made man on the earth, and it grieved him to his heart. So the Lord said, I will blot out man, whom I have created from the face of the land, the man, the animals, the creeping things, and the birds of heaven, for I am sorry that I have made them. Verse 8, underline it. This is the reason you and I are surviving today, to listen to this word. But Noah found favor in the eyes of the Lord. Isn't that beautiful? You know why we have fossils? Because God compacted them all together. You know the reason you can put gas in your car and we have coal? because all plant life got compacted and died in the flood for the most part. We have fossil fuels because they all died. And understand this. Listen, Noah, in his day, it had never flooded the earth like that. They had local floods. It possibly rained, all kinds of stuff. He wouldn't need to bring birds into the ark. If it was just a local flood, the birds would have just flown somewhere else. For that matter, he could have just walked to dry land. It says that God destroyed the whole earth, everything that breathed air, and he destroyed it because of the sin of humanity. But it said that Noah found favor in the eyes of the Lord, him and his family. And 8 people went on the ark with representative pairs. And it says for 100 years, Noah built this wooden barge on dry land. And imagine how Noah's culture mocked him. Oh, sweet little boat you got, Noah. Is it going to rain? I bet there's going to be a little flood. Need a little boat? Because I got a boat for this lake over here. You can use that if you want. And he built a massive barge because he had faith that God was going to be trustworthy to what he said. Number 1, he was going to do what he said and destroy the earth. And number 2, he was going to save Noah. And he did both of those things. And it showed the faith that Noah had in unbelievable circumstances. God had never done that before, and he has never done it since. A one-time, one-off event, Noah had so much faith, he went against his culture, he went against the whole world and built an ark, and it saved his life. And today, we live because of Noah's faith. That Noah found favor in the eyes of the Lord. That's true faith. Faith isn't just belief, it's believing so that you act what you believe. Belief creates faith, which creates action. You can't just say you believe something just because it sits in your head. Belief has to seep into your heart so that it affects how you live. Faith, listen to me and I'm done. Faith without action is non-existent faith. You can't say you have faith in something and not act. When I sit in the airplane seat and the airplane guy flies, that's the pilot, I have total faith, I'm at peace because I believe in his training. I have total peace. The same thing with God. I believe what God is doing and I am at peace. And my faith promotes action towards the God I love. It's not just information, it's transformation that changes my life as I reach out to a culture that I love.